Hi! Within this lecture, we're gonna focus on solving the Kali Linux installation problems. Now, if you have installed the Kali Linux and if it works, then you're more than welcome to skip those lectures. However, if you experienced any problem, then we're gonna see what we can do during these lectures. And this lecture actually aims to solve problems mainly inside of the Windows operating system. So if you're Mac, maybe you may skip this lecture and just go along with the Mac lecture as well. But like as a general idea, I'd suggest you stick to it and watch the entire thing. So anyway, maybe you have a free space problem in your computer. Maybe you cannot see 64-bit selections in the settings. I will show you how to solve them. So I would suggest starting by checking how much you have as a free space on your computer, because these things can get like 30 gigabytes of space. Okay, so if you don't have any free space, just make sure you delete something and you have the free space, and then you try to start the Kali Linux. But if you actually come over here and if you remove the Kali Linux, by the way, deleting all the files, it will just delete everything, and you will be as if like you never installed the Kali Linux in the first place. So many people think that, yeah, I have 50 gigabyte of free space. If I install the Kali Linux, I will lose that forever. That's not true. If you use the Kali Linux and if you delete it later on, nothing will be left of it. Anyway, just check the free space. If you don't have enough free space, make sure you delete something that you're not using so that Kali Linux can have its own free space and it can start working. So maybe that's the issue, but maybe that's not. Maybe virtualization is the issue. And mainly, the virtualization is the actual issue. So if you cannot see the 64-bit options, then virtualization is the issue. If you start the Kali Linux and get a related error message such as virtualization is not enabled, SVM is not enabled, cannot find VEM, something like that, then here's what you should do. You're gonna have to go to Google. And you're gonna have to figure out how to enable virtualization on your own computer yourself, because it's different for each computer, it's different for each operating system, each processor, each brand. So you're gonna have to do a little bit of research. For example, this is the main term that we are looking for, virtualization. Okay, so your computer can actually let virtualization, and you can virtualize machines like we are doing with the Kali Linux, or you can virtualize Android operating system, for example, so that you can try some Android phones, Android applications and stuff. But you gotta do this. You gotta search for your own computer brand, your own processor brand, and your operating system, and then say enable virtualization. This is just an example. HP, Intel, Windows, enable virtualization. Okay, so if you're using an HP computer, then just write it. If you're using an Intel processor, just write it. If you're using an AMD processor, just write it. And if you're using something else than Windows, just write it. For example, Asus, AMD, Windows virtualization. Okay, because it's different for every brand, it's different for every processor. And of course, you can just search it like this, Windows enable virtualization, and you're still gonna get like millions of results. Let me open one of those, like BlueStacks over here. As you can see, it says that how to enable virtualization or VT on Windows. And as you can see, there are many tutorials, many guides on YouTube, on Google, on blogs and stuff. And as you can see, there are a couple of things to do, like going into the security options and try to troubleshoot, or going to the advanced options and just enable it from there. But many of times you're gonna have to go into the BIOS. So you're gonna have to enable virtualization in BIOS. And this is valid for Intel CPUs, this is valid for AMD CPUs, And in order to go into the BIOS, again, most probably you're gonna have to restart your computer, and before the Windows boots, there should be some kind of a key like F7, delete, escape. I don't know, it's different for every brand. Again, you're gonna have to click on that, and you're gonna have to go into the BIOS and find the virtualization and make it enabled. So there are a lot of tutorials depending on your computer, depending on your processor. Make sure you find one for you. As you can see, they're totally different. Okay, even though they're looking for the same thing, they're looking for SVM, they're looking for virtualization, VTX, Intel VTX technology. So these can be different alternatives that you're going to see throughout this process. However, the screens, the UI is always different. So the keys can be different, the menus can be different. As you can see, AMD says it's SVM mode, but Intel says it's VTX mode. Okay, so make sure you find one for yourself, for your own computer, and make sure it is enabled. Okay, and even after that, you should save it most of the time before you go into the Windows. If you save it and if it doesn't work, make sure you come again and check it one more time. So there's another thing called Hyper-V in Windows, and most of the time you should disable it in order to make sure that VirtualBox is working. If VirtualBox is working without disabling it, just don't do it. But if it's not working, let's give it a shot and disable the Hyper-V, and then try starting the Kali Linux one more time. Again, it can differ from Windows to Windows. If you search how to disable Hyper-V in Windows 10 or Windows 11, you will find some tutorials over here. I'm sorry that I cannot show you all of those things live, but again, it's different for every computer. Even though if I can figure out a way for me to show you the BIOS settings on my computer, it won't make sense to you. And even though if you do all of those things, even if you enable the virtualization, even if you disable the Hyper-V, if it's not working again, then make sure you check the next lecture where we will install the ISO file to the Windows or to the virtual machine, VirtualBox itself, and maybe it's gonna work. And if it's not gonna work, then don't worry, there is a document in the course where you will find some alternative solutions for the installation problems as well. So more than 100,000 students got my ethical hacking courses around the world, and as far as I see, they all saw those issues. Okay, just don't worry about it, Google it, try to research it, and maybe it's gonna take a little bit more time for you, maybe it's just gonna work, but you will make it. Okay, so after you make it, I believe this is the hardest part of the course. If you can make the Kali Linux work, then it's gonna be okay. And by the way, VirtualBox is not the only alternative. I have seen many cases people could not actually run this thing on VirtualBox, and eventually they would have to shift to the VMware. As I said before, VMware is another virtualization tool, and this is actually much more professional, but it's not free. But if you research this through the internet, I believe you would find some free versions as well. Since this is not open source or not free, we're not going to be using this during the course, but I have seen many people that no matter what they did, they couldn't make the VirtualBox work, and they just shifted to the VMware and it just worked. Okay, so maybe you can save this like a last resort thingy, but again, it's worth a shot if VirtualBox does not work in the next lecture and in the documentation as well, after you check all of those things. But after you run the Kali Linux, it won't matter anyway. Okay, so here is our one of the final options. We're gonna go into the bare metal and we're gonna just download the ISO file. Okay, here you will see the 64-bit, 32-bit, and M1 chip as well. We're gonna talk about the M1 chip in the Mac solution, Mac problem solution lecture. But right now, you're just gonna have to come over here and download the 64-bit ISO or 32-bit ISO if nothing else has worked for you. So there are a couple of other options here as well right now. Maybe you will see them, maybe you won't. We're not gonna just spend too much time on them. We're just gonna download the ISO file. And we're going to actually install this manually to the VirtualBox as if we are installing it in a real machine as a main operating system. Okay, sometimes OVAs can cause problems and ISOs come into play and solve that problems. Great, so if you have installed this, then just meet me in the next lecture where we will see how to install it like as if we are doing it in a real machine.